London calling YouTube, London calling everyone, and in this week of the Red Moon, prophesied by Scripture, I gather, I think the world is supposed to have ended by now. Gunderson, how was your apocalypse?
It were a right good un, lad.
Hey, and Vil, how was the apocalypse for you?
The Jedi's attempt on my life has left me scarred and deformed, but my resolve has never been stronger.
Excellent. Okay. Well, good to know that you're up for the show, despite having been enforced by the sounds of this. Gunderson and Vil, the voices you just heard, are new guests. So, Gunderson, why don't you tell us something about yourself?
I have a lot of ideas for videos that I never make because I'm very limited in my video editing resources. That's all I can think of.
I know the feeling. And, Vil, little something about yourself?
Oh, God. My mother, she threw me down the stairs and threw a pan of hot grease all over my chest and neck and ass. I can't walk anywhere, and I've got awful piles and bunions on my feet. Oh, God.
That sounds truly harrowing. I had no idea.
On a serious note, I don't know. They still haven't put the net back over my head and put me back in my cage, so make of it what you will.
Okay. Well, we're off to an interesting start, and I think, Vil, I think you've heard this show before, and you're trying to out crazy Milan, which is quite something. I dread to think what it would be like to have you and Milan on the same show. This combination may be bad for the universe. Right. Some of you out there may be aware that a topic that we discussed last week, a trans love song in music video form from Thailand, which went viral, is debatably not as progressive as one might hope. Now, when we watched that video, everybody but me was only watching it just before we hit record. I hadn't seen it with captions before. There was an article. It'll be linked in the description yet again. And we cut a lot of slack for Thai culture because none of us were particularly familiar with Thailand. And I will agree that there were some problematical things which we didn't really address. Also, I don't know exactly how well translated it was. But you've got, it is a moving love story. It does increase transgender visibility. It did address the problem of violence against trans people. But you still get words such as ladyboy, and the main thing that I think for me was the assumption that the song makes that the audience would be familiar with the stereotype that transgender women are permissive and will cheat on you, they're not faithful, which we don't really have as a stereotype for trans people in the UK. I'd say it's bisexuals who get that stereotype. And I think the argument, there was a video response from UJames1978, and his video will also be linked in the description. I think it comes down to, and I've had this sort of conversation with James before, about things that I like, as, an LGBTQ individual myself, that visibility is better than invisibility.
Sorry.
That's okay. Even if it's not perfect. And I think ultimately, for me, every journey starts with but a single step. As a bisexual teenager, I watched a show called This Life, and I even saw an article recently on why This Life was great in the 90s and why it's shite now. Now, the reality is, it did feature gay characters, and it was very open about sexuality, and it featured a bisexual character who got shit even from a gay person. Especially from a gay person who pretty much didn't think that bisexuals existed or just in denial. And I followed what the 3D character went through in the couple of years that show was on. I was dismayed in the 10th anniversary reunion special, because in the first scene there was a funeral. Guess what? It's Ferdy's funeral. Are they going to say he died of an STD? Oh, yes, they are. And a bit of a stab in the back, if you were bisexual who was watching this oh-so-progressive show back in the 90s for Ferdy. But I would argue that, yes, it's not as great when you look back. If we hadn't had this life, though, would Channel 4 have commissioned Queer as Folk? Would there, and hence there then being a Queer as Folk USA, which may, in fact, have led to the L Word being greenlighted, and we're at the point we are now. And we were very hard when it comes to trans issues on Dallas Buyers Club. But Dallas Buyers Club is Hollywood. It has a much higher profile than a Thai music video, at least in the West. Also, I felt as a Western film depicting a trans character, Dallas Buyers Club didn't just fail to be progressive, I felt it was a bit backward. But that's my attempt at addressing the criticism of the video and the coverage that we gave it. If anyone has any opinions, please put them in the... I can't speak today. In the description. What I will say, so as to throw it open to the floor, is would you agree with me, starting with Gunderson, because I like to be alphabetical, that sometimes even imperfect visibility is better than not having visibility at all, and that you just have to accept that sort of progress takes place kind of slowly, you know?
Well, the thing is, I don't really know what the visibility of trans people already is in Thailand. I'm guessing from all this that it's not, the visibility is somewhat lacking for trans women in particular in Thailand.
Well, I suppose they're always seen as, well, they're called ladyboys. They're associated with sex work.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
well, okay, does the term ladyboy exist in Thai, or is that just an English word?
I don't know if it's a direct translation of a particular term that they have. But it seems very clear from the video alone that these are the sorts of stereotypes which, as I say, we were judging something in another culture. At least the video was depicting a character who wasn't permissive. It's even called Transgender Woman Doesn't Cheat. But that sort of implies that people are already familiar with, if not accepting, that negative stereotype of being permissive and cheating on your partner. But I mean, generally, though, I mean, with my point about... also, I'll hand it over to Vil. This could really be said of any social group that's underrepresented. And, you know, where I talked about bisexuals in the UK and the progression in television throughout my adult life. I mean, what do you think? Is it worth accepting, I suppose, compromise?
Well, first I have to point out that I've not seen the video in particular. My only understanding of anything to do with, you know, Thailand and the transgenders really kind of backs up part of what you were saying, because I honestly thought that it must be a huge open thing over there, because, oh my God, if you're surfing the net, you know, you get bombarded with porn ads, and every time that you see a porn ad come up that has trans people, and even if you're not looking for that, and I'm not, it pops up, because I'll sometimes go to other things, and everything trans that ever pops up is Thailand. And keep in mind, this is from somebody who doesn't specifically look for that, because that's just not where my interests are. I'm not knocking it for people that are. And if it's coming up for somebody that doesn't look for it and it's always Thailand, it makes it look like it's a big open thing there. But for me to know if it really is, because let's face it, if you judge the world through the lens of porn, you have a problem. I would have to go to Thailand or know people from there with whom I could speak freely about it, and I don't. Overall, on the whole issue, see, I'm very much, I don't know how familiar you are with American politics, but I'm a libertarian, and I very much think that the more that we get the government the hell out of things, and the more that we stop making an issue of them and just let people live their lives, the better off that we'll be. I don't think that it really matters what I think or you think or the next person does about someone being gay, bi, or whatever, as long as they're not harming anyone else, it's really not my place to tell them how to live their life. And if we all had that attitude, we'd have a lot less problems.
Well, I mean, it's also, it is something quite strongly associated with Thailand because, I mean, if you even say the word Thailand, that's probably one of the first things that comes to mind for a lot of people is, well, trans female sex workers, which is like I remember seeing it's like a parody of the Rosetta Stone ads that has like the usual I'm learning Russian so I can communicate with my auntie or whatever, and at the bottom there's a guy with a shocked expression on his face saying I'm learning Thai so I can go to Thailand for a thing.
Right.
So
okay.
that's the kind of stuff. So yeah, it is quite strongly associated with Thailand in the West, I suppose. But yeah, I guess I don't know how well perceived and how well represented trans people are in Thai culture in general. So I can't really say whether this is progressive.
Yeah. As you, James, pointed out in the video, and as was briefly touched upon last week, in those East Asian and Southeast Asian cultures, because they have the tradition of belief in reincarnation, it's just kind of accepted. So that a male soul was accidentally born in a female body, or vice versa. So they have that acceptance, but it comes with that understanding. So they've probably been more socially accepted in a sense in those countries than in other places because they've got that explanation that kind of clicks for them. Wrong soul, wrong body.
I thought he said it was just Thailand. I'm not aware of any association with trans people in China, Japan, Korea, etc.
There'll be other factors as well, political, cultural, what have you, but I don't know if it is if it is just Thailand. But you see what I'm saying, though, that that's the religious tradition, that those are the beliefs, and so maybe someone can tell us in the comment section if Thailand is the exception. But, okay, any more thoughts on that topic?
I'm trying to think.
Not really, to be honest. I have to stick with what I said, which is that and this doesn't just relate to this issue. I mean, I could put this opinion towards so many different things, but when it comes right down to the sexuality of others, as long as they're not harming anyone else, it's not really my business. And if we all just kind of took that outlook, oh man, we wouldn't have to worry about who's more tolerant. It would become a non-issue. It's just like we're stuck living in caves.
Okay, I guess you mentioned earlier that they have the belief of reincarnation, therefore it's possible that a male soul was born into a female body or whatever. Well, I mean, I guess I'm wondering why is there so much focus on trans women specifically? Like, I guess I'm thinking, why are trans men so invisible in Thai culture, or at least from what I can tell, from admittedly an obviously English perspective?
I suppose because they've been sufficiently recognised in the culture that basically because it's still patriarchal, men quite often, enough men fancy trans women.
I was going to say, that was what I was thinking, because it's a patriarchal culture, and therefore it's probably still seen as a man's, like, I guess female sexuality is probably still seen largely as a commodity that men buy or earn in some way.
Phil, when you're typing, could you mute?
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
Also, I would say, actually, that generally speaking, I'd say it's also true in the UK and the US that trans women get noticed more. Well, actually, one thing that Bun brought up is that trans women get transphobia and they get trans misogyny. The idea being as Bunn explained it, that they've committed the cardinal sin of giving up their masculinity. So maybe that's because that's another factor, is that they're more visible, but also there's a special kind of like double bigotry against trans women for that reason.
Yep, I can certainly see that, because they're still perceived. A lot of people still perceive them as men. So that would explain that. Like that's, I would say it's. I mean, I've as a bloke who's worn women's clothes myself, I can say that that's certainly something people rip the piss out of you for, especially other cis men.
Yeah. But yes, and still something that a lot of people don't understand. I mean, transgender specifically. When I was doing the tags for last week's video, and I actually mentioned it on Facebook, I put in the words transgender and trans into the... For people who don't know, if you do a YouTube video, you put tags in for the searches, and Google sometimes completes for you, or gives you recommendations. And if you put transgender and trans in, it actually suggests drag.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. Okay, tonight you have been listening to my guests from Yorkshire, Gunderson.
Yes, see ya.
And from stateside, Bill.
See you.
Good night, YouTube. Good night, everyone.